Hello, and welcome to the AFP webinar, Working and Embracing Your Legacy Pipeline. Thank you for joining us. My name is Alex, and I'll be the operator for the presentation today. Before we get started, I'd like to take just a moment to acquaint you with a few features of this web event technology. At any time, you may adjust your audio using any computer volume settings that you may have. On the right-hand side of your screen, you will see the text chat windows. There is a large window which holds all of your sent messages and a smaller text box at the bottom where you will type in your questions. To send a question, click in the text box and type your text. When finished, click the send button. Your questions will be responded in the order in which they were received and will be addressed at the end of the presentation. At the conclusion of today's program, we ask that you complete a brief post-event survey. Please take just a moment to complete this survey as it will help AFP plan future web events. Our presenter today is Ligia Pena, CFRE. She is a Global Legacy Manager at Greenpeace International. For the past 15 years, she has been working with a wide range of organizations on all aspects of fundraising, communications, and management. However, her true passion has always been empowering small nonprofits. She is the author of the Small Shop Fundraising chapter in the second volume of Excellence in Fundraising in Canada, as well as several articles in various electronic and print publications. Ligia is very active in the Canadian charitable sector by serving on several committees at AFP International and having served on several nonprofit boards. She is a member in good standing of the AFP and the CAGP ACPDP. Ligia will now turn the time over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here. I hope you're all excited to talk and listen and exchange on working a legacy pipeline, which is, as we all know, very, very important when we want to have a successful legacy program. Just a few points of clarification. I know in North America, the usual term used for this kind of stuff is plan giving. But I was corrupted when I moved to Greenpeace 2 years ago. The term, we use legacy, and to be more specific, we're talking about gifts and wills, so bequests. And the reason why we use the term legacy is because we feel that as a global organization, it's a much better representation of the type of gift that we will solicit our supporters for. So just to make it very clear so there's no misunderstanding, we'll be talking specifically about bequests and not about all kinds of plan gifts. However, having said that, of course, you can use the pipeline tool for other plan giving vehicles. So just keep that in mind. So I'm seeing here in the comments that the sound is coming in and out. I hope that it is better now. I will make sure to speak slowly and clearly, but if I go too fast, please raise your hand and say something. And one last point of clarification, I encourage you to ask your questions as we go along so that we can address them and then it doesn't throw you off. Because I know when I attend webinars, if I'm told that I can only ask questions at the end, I will not remember my question and the context. So, and sometimes you need to understand one thing at one point in order to understand the pieces that come afterwards. So what I'll do is as we move along, I will slow down, check in with you guys to see if you have any questions, and then proceed. So, all right, let's go. Let's start. So when we talk about a pipeline, a legacy pipeline, is your reaction this? Because this tends to happen with a lot of people. They just sometimes don't understand what that looks like, and it sounds very, very complex. So why don't we just dive in? So here are a few facts, and I'm going to give you a little bit of information from around the world because I work in a capacity of driving this global strategy of legacy giving throughout all of Greenpeace around the world. So I get to touch on trends and observations that I'm seeing all over the world, which I think could be very useful in advancing legacy giving in North America. So here's a few stats. People are leaving more legacy gifts in a lot of the markets where there's a strong culture of philanthropy. So in the UK, it has gone from 12% in 2007 to 17% in 2016. So that is a very big increase in just 9 years. And the reason why this has happened is because the umbrella organization, legacy organization in the UK called Remember a Charity, which is their equivalent of Leave a Legacy in North America, is that they've done a very intense and strategic education campaign to normalize legacy giving. So they've basically made it part of the conversation, of this philanthropic conversation, to include gifts and wills for donors. So it's become second nature. It's not a foreign concept to the British market. And what we've observed in the markets where there's been a strong campaign like that, or where organizations do really well in advancing legacy giving, is that they end up getting a lot more legacy gifts. So those are some of the elements, a few facts that help in ensuring that you have an easier route to advance legacy giving. So our job as plan giving professionals, or just general fundraisers, I think this is something that every fundraiser should be doing, not just plan giving professionals, is that our job is to normalize that conversation. And that starts from the first gift, from the first point of engagement of your supporters. And that is where the reason being is, the more you normalize the conversation, the more you educate, and I don't like using that term because it just feels very, very pejorative, but the more you raise awareness with your donors that they can give donations in various forms at different points in their life is where is basically the name of the game. That's the secret sauce to good fundraising. And of course, it's an emotional act. It's not about death, because you need to be alive in order to make a legacy gift. And so we need to demystify that within our shops, within the organization, and with our supporters. We need to demystify that the emotion, that the story has to be very emotional, but that you also need to do it when you're live, because, it's too late once you're past. So these are some clear facts. Before I move on, I see Noelle's comment. She's asking if the presentation will be available after the webinar. Well, absolutely. Actually, the presentation is available right now. You'll see in your screen there should be a box that says Files to Download, and you see 2 documents that you can download right now. And so then you can look at it after with your colleagues. And then there's one tool that's there, the Simplified Legacy Pipeline, which is basically the entire presentation, but it's my working document, and it's the pipeline that we developed at Greenpeace. And there's one more document that I'll mention later on that is missing here, but will be sent to you after the webinar. So I'll come back to that later. So I hope that helps. All right, moving on. So another few more facts. Some of them, it's important to be aware of the barriers to leaving a gift, a legacy gift. And of course, the first one that's often mentioned is that the donor wants to think about their family first. And of course, that is always the number one thing that we need to reassure donors, that they should take care of their loved ones. Actually, I don't even say family. I say loved ones, because for some people, your family is not necessarily your loved ones, but the definition of family could be different for different people. And so what I always recommend to all the legacy managers at Greenpeace is, and what I recommend to all nonprofits, is to always have that, standard wording of, after you've taken care of your loved ones, remember my organization in your will. That's a very clear tagline. Another reason why people sometimes don't leave a gift is because they never thought of it. It's not the norm. Again, the whole conversation about normalizing legacy giving. It's not something people like to do. It's not something that people like. People don't seem to think that it's something they should be doing, or that they, it's in their purview, for instance. There's a huge misconception that in order to leave a gift in a will, you need to be extremely wealthy. And as we know, it's nothing could be farther from the truth. We know that legacy giving, gifts and wills are based on assets. They're not based on cash today. And so those are the kinds of things that need to be demystified, right? And fear of changing circumstances. Of course, when you're retired, you're on a fixed income. You don't know if you will need money at a later time, if you might need to liquidate some assets, if you fall ill, or whatever the case may be. So those are very considerable barriers. But I think my stance on these kinds of things is if you're very clear and you communicate how to structure a legacy gift, it can be overcome. So basically our job is to address these barriers. And so like I mentioned, something like mentioning something like after you've taken care of your family or your loved ones, think about leaving as a gift. And another consideration is normalizing smaller gifts. So, sometimes some fundraisers, some organizations could get a little bit greedy and want to have the bigger gift. And what we've seen, and this is especially actually the case in the UK, and I presented a similar webinar with my colleague, my counterpart at Amnesty International. And what they did is they started normalizing a conversation about smaller legacy gifts. So not so much the 100% of the estate, but saying if you give 5% of your estate, that's a start. And so for a certain segment of your donor base, that could be something that is more acceptable, more feasible. So something to consider. And of course, the most important part, and I'm not telling you anything you've never heard before, but it's important to talk about the impact of legacy. So what is the world that could be created if your donor left a gift in their will? So creating that emotional reaction and to get them to think about what they leave behind, what their legacy should be. And so those are the interesting things and the important things that we need to be doing starting out. So something really important. Why should we care? Well, we know that we're in the biggest wealth transfer from one generation to the next. We've been talking about it for many, many years. As far as since I started in professional fundraising 15 years ago, I've been hearing about this. And so it's been estimated to be at approximately $46 billion US, which is quite a big chunk of change. So imagine just receiving 1.1% of that, what impact that would have, right? But in order to do that, we need to be strategic. We need to think about how we do it, and we actually have to do it. So how about we do it? Let's start talking about the pipeline. So where do we start? So there's a baseline. So let me explain to you a little bit what we've done at Greenpeace and why this is our way of working our files. And a little bit of context. I know in my bio it says I'm all about empowering small nonprofits. That's because I come from a small shop environment. I would say 95% of my career has been in a small shop. And I just now, 2 years ago, joined Greenpeace. So it's a huge, huge adjustment from going from being the sole fundraiser in a small organization, raising, maybe $1 million a year Canadian, to going into Greenpeace International, where legacy giving raises about 25 million euros annually. So it's a big, big jump. But we have a very structured process, and we used to have a 10-stage legacy pipeline, which was very, very complex and was implemented by my predecessor. And so in talking with all our offices, it became very clear that it was too onerous for the managers to do this. So we simplified it to a 6-step process. And this is what we'll be talking about today. So, of course, when you start off, you need to have your baseline. So where do you start from, right? So this is where we're going. So the baseline is really the snapshot of where you're starting from, right? That's pretty straightforward. So the way we define it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain to you how we define it. And of course, it could be slightly different for you, for your organization, because your organization obviously has a different database. You're working in a different environment, a different cost, etc. But let me give you what we do, and then we can see how things could be, modified or, to your own reality. So for us, the baseline, our starting point is any supporter, financial or non-financial, who has the potential to be interested in making a legacy gift. And in order to do that, what we do when we start off is we have a bequest prospect workbook. And this is one of the documents that will be shared with you after, because it was my mistake. I failed to share it with Blue Sky. But basically, it is a workbook where you would do some data mining, and you're going to be pulling reports. So the way it looks like, it's an Excel spreadsheet, and it's really quite straightforward, and I think you'll be able to figure it out. So we start off by doing queries of looking at all the supporters who have been giving for 25 years and plus, and then we go from 20 to 25, from 15 to 25, 10 to 15, and then 5 to 10, and less than 5. And then you pull all that, and then we look at how long. Sorry, I'm completely confusing my words here. Then we look at the length of support and then their age, okay? And so then, having done all those queries, then you have to merge them, and this is where you start prioritizing your prospects. So to be smart, and if you've got limited resources, you would look at all your supporters who've been giving you for more than 25 years who are over the age of 75. And then you would stay at all the supporters who've been giving you for more than 25 years who are between the ages of 65 and 75. So then what that does is it gives you like a priority list of all your segments, so that if you're in a small shop where you don't have the capacity, the financial or the HR capacity to do everybody at the same time, you can go small bites, right? So you prioritize that way. And so that's how you build your baseline, your prospect list, okay? So working it that way, you can be very strategic. You're not wasting time. You're not firing all over the place. And you know exactly how to get organized and how to develop your strategy. So what I didn't mention at the beginning of this session is this is not going to be the kind of webinar where you sit back, put your feet up on your desk, drink your latte, and listen. There's going to be a little bit of group work, because normally if we were doing this face-to-face, we would be doing actual group work with Post-its and everything. But what we're going to do is we're going to use the chat box, or like where you can ask questions, and we're going to brainstorm. So here's the activity. Before we go to the activity, I see a couple of questions. So what if you do not have the ages of all your, let me see, I don't see the whole question, of all your donors. So this is a really interesting thing. This is where you could I absolutely love surveys to a certain degree. So this is where you could do a quick little survey. You could do a satisfaction survey with your donors. You can do it online. You can do it by mail. And in the survey, it could be like 5 questions, really quick, and then you can ask some demographic questions. So you could ask the month and year of their birth. You don't need to actually know their birth date. But so then that's a good way to collect their age. And then obviously enter that in your database. And then try to make your processes, like if you've got online sign up forms that people can sign up for news and stuff like that. Make sure that you integrate also a month and year of date, so that a month and year of birth, so that you can start adding it to your database. So that's a cheap and quick and easy way of collecting year ages. How many prospects can a fundraiser handle? This is such a difficult question to answer because there's so many variables. I know for major gifts, usually a lot of major gifts specialists say, a portfolio of no more than 100 to 150 prospects. For legacies, because the relationship is a little bit different, I think it could be a little bit more, but I think it really comes down to there's an analysis of your resources that you need to do in order to determine that, because it's a much slower process. Especially if you're trying to do that education aspect, you leave them a lot of time to read and assess and everything. So I think you could probably handle a little bit more. What do I think about 75 years too late to bring up legacy giving? Most donors that age probably have their estate planned out already. Possibly, it could be, but don't forget that they could also do a codicil, because the way I see it is, if they're over the age of 75, but they've been supporting you for many, many years, you are a big part of their life. You are obviously a charity that they care about a lot. So I don't think that being over the age of 75 necessarily means that that's it, you've missed your opportunity. I think there's still an opportunity. What perhaps a key message you would probably want to communicate is that is the idea of doing a codicil, which it doesn't require going to be notarized or anything. It could be done quite easily. So that's a good way of getting around that. Do you recommend hiring an outside company to do database segmentation? I don't think you need to, because it's really, honestly, if you've got a good database person, doing the segmentation shouldn't take more than half a day, honestly. I used to do all the segmentation myself when I was in a small shop using Razor's Edge, and the queries are quite simple. So I don't think so. You could, I guess, if you don't have the capacity to do it in-house, and you can get someone externally, but I guess I'm a bit of a control freak as well, and I like to do my own segmentation, because sometimes there's some factors that you know as a fundraiser about your database that an external consultant may not be able to know. Okay, so little activity. I'll come back to the rest of the questions because I want to make sure that we progress and that. And again, if I don't get to your question right away, we'll leave some time at the end to come back to the questions. I just want to make sure we move ahead and don't have to rush the last 10 minutes of the presentation. So we'll take 1 minute quickly. Your first instincts, right ways in which you can start a legacy conversation with your supporters. So if you have to start tomorrow, how would you engage them? I'll give you 1 minute to write your answer in the question box. Go. Normally I would have put that Jeopardy music. Okay, so giving you about 10 more seconds. So I like Kristen's suggestion here is thank you calls, and that's dead on. When I was working at my previous organization, which was a really small shop, I was alone with a part-time assistant. I built my prospect list by thank you calls. So whenever every single donor that made a gift to the organization got a thank you call from me, and so I started building my list because I figured if I called in the middle of the afternoon and their voice was a little bit shaky and they were eager to talk, I would definitely stay on the phone however long they wanted to stay on the phone. But to me, that indicated that that was a prospect because they were home in the afternoon, whereas most people who work would not be. And then I would engage them by asking them, like, questions about what inspired them to start giving to the organization, et cetera, et cetera. And by their answers, they would end up self-identifying. Absolutely asking questions like, would you, we would like to include you in the Legacy Society. Including someone in a Legacy Society is when they've already pledged their gift to you, and then that's how you would want it. But you could definitely start doing some drip marketing in your newsletter or in bug clicks, talking about the Legacy Society in your organization. So here's other ways that you can start a legacy conversation. You can send out a survey. So once you've done the segmentation that I was referring to, you can send out a preliminary survey. So basically, it's no more than 10 questions, two or three warm-up questions about giving to the organization, giving in general, and then you can start asking questions about, did you know that, and using, statistics from your country or from your community, X% of people leave gifts in their wills to their charities. Is this something you've considered? Questions like that. So you build it up so that your survey at the end leads into the ask of, would you consider this something? Is this something you would consider for, my organization? So here there's a lot of great suggestions. So just so you know, so in the Excel spreadsheet, the survey the simplified legacy pipeline, there are some examples of ways to engage your supporters at every stage. And what I'll do is I'll collate all of your responses and add them to the activities in their respective spots so that we don't lose this great brainstorming that we're doing, everybody together. So good job. Thank you, everybody. All right, moving on. So the next step, the second step, is the rejectors. Yes, sadly, there will be people who will reject. So when I say rejectors is basically if, as a baseline, you've sent out a survey and you obviously will get responses from people who said, yes, I'd love to find out a little bit more. We'll talk about that shortly. And then you'll have some people who say, no, I'm not interested. I don't want to hear about it. It's not something I'm considering. And they're not interested. So the key feature is usually you will get this through a mass marketing approach. And so if they are rejectors, to me, in my book, they are not a rejector forever. They are a rejector for now. We all know that, a no never means no forever. It just means no for now. And to me, I interpret legacy rejectors as people who perhaps are not quite there yet in their lifetime, or they don't know what you're talking about, or they are not comfortable with the conversation, which means we need to go back to the whole normalizing issue that we were talking about earlier. So although I would flag them in my database as being rejectors, I would not bump them out. It would be, a group of people that I would keep separate and probably develop a specific strategy to do more drip marketing through different forms, perhaps soften a little bit the approach so it's a little bit more subtle, but then, probably come back to them and ask them perhaps a year and a half, 2 years later, to see if perhaps their response has changed. So don't think that a rejector necessarily means forget it, close file, and put them out of your database. So again, another exercise. What would you do with your rejectors beyond what I just shared with you? How would you want to handle this? So we'll give you a few seconds to answer in the chat box. Let's see. I'm not seeing any updates, but I think, just continuing some drip marketing is the best way, and continuing to convey the impact of legacy gifts is a great way to do this. A lot of answers are coming in. Keeping direct mail if low level, or major gift or larger cash gift is still coming. Exactly. So they may not be a legacy prospect for today, but they could be a middle or major gift prospect. So, and again, so this is where breaking down internal silos becomes very important, because you may want to go and talk to your digital team and see if there's other ways to engage the person, or, you know, speak to your middle or major gifts officer to see if there's something else that you could do, you know, engage them in other ways, but never, ever cut them off, ever. I love lapsed donors. So here's a little tidbit that's not in the presentation, and this is something that a dear friend of mine and fundraising colleague of mine encountered a few years ago. She's a consultant, and she was working with a big hospital in the U.S., and their database manager is a data whiz. And he started doing a little bit of research on their legacy gifts that were coming in, and he noticed that a lot of legacy gifts that were coming in for the hospital foundation were coming from lapsed donors. And so when he started digging around, he figured out that oftentimes, and that was the case for their organization, I'm not saying this would be the case for everybody, but this is just an example, is that some donors were, you know, they were giving regularly, but then their life situation changed, and so they lapsed. They stopped giving either monthly or annually because, you know, for financial reasons or whatever personal reasons was there. But lapse does not necessarily mean out of their heart, right? It just means that financially they just cannot continue giving to you at this point in time. But then they had still remembered the organization in their will, and the gift came in later on. So the moral of the story is, it's not because someone lapsed that it means that they don't want to give to you. It just means that they can't today. So that's why the continuing communicating is so important. I see a quick comment here, including in Valentine's programs and other soft appreciations. Absolutely, I did that at my last organization. I sent Valentine's cards to all our $500 and plus donors, and you know, my board thought I was absolutely crazy and I was wasting my time. And I got so many calls. And first of all, there was no ask. It was just, you know, a postcard saying, "Hey, happy Valentine's Day. We love you. Thank you for your support." That's all it was. There was no ask, nothing more. And I got so many calls. I even got a whole bunch of donations from donors who said, you know, I haven't received a Valentine's Day card in decades, and this really warmed my heart. So absolutely love them to death. All right, third stage. We're halfway there. Pre-considerers. So these are donors who basically the definition is that they said to you after, you know, responding to either a mass marketing of a survey or a telephone call to do a telephone survey. They said, "I'm unsure if I would be leaving a gift in my will, but I'm aware of it." Or if they're saying to you, "Please contact me later, I'm not ready." So now they're in the pre-consideration stage. So that means they're a little bit warmer, but they're not quite there yet. So you want to use some mass marketing approaches to begin the relationship. So without giving you all the answers, and I'm going to make you work again, let's brainstorm. So again, using the chat box, how would you handle your donor's response? So a donor says to you, you know, I know about this, but I'm not quite there yet. So how would you get them to feel more comfortable and probably move forward in the pipeline, move forward in the process? I'll give you 1 quick minute. In the meantime, while you're writing your answers, I see a question here from someone that's asking me to define what drip marketing is. Drip marketing is, think about, you know, a faucet that's dripping, you know, drop by drop, right? So a little bit of water falls, and that noise really drives you batty, and you have to go and close the faucet, right? Well, think about marketing. Drip marketing is basically dropping little bits of messages in different places. So, it could be in a buck slip. It can be in your newsletter. It could be on your website. It could be on an e-blast. So basically, anytime there is a communication to your supporters about something, you can slide in a small message about legacy giving, about the different ways that donors can leave a gift in their will, all the impact that legacy gifts have on the organization's mission, etc. So that's what drip marketing is. I hope that helps and it's clearer now. So some answers. So here I'm saying, try face-to-face meetings. Absolutely. Use it as an opportunity to request an in-person visit. Absolutely. Share a story of current legacy donors. Yeah, these are all amazing, amazing answers. These are fabulous. Discuss how one is ready today to plan for their departure. That is why it is so important to plan for that today. Absolutely. Talking about, it's important to start planning today because, tomorrow may never come. Of course, not using that language, using much softer language than that, but so that kind of stuff. This is really great. You guys are awesome. Excellent. So next step. So now you've got so you're warming them up. You're doing your marketing. You're reaching out to them. You're building a relationship. Now they're considering it. So the next stage of considerers is considerers. So the way we define it is anyone who has requested information or has indicated that they are considering leaving a gift. So it could be someone who, when you did your initial survey at the beginning and the way they responded to the survey, they said, yes, I know about leaving a gift in my will, and I am considering leaving one to your organization. So now they just self-identified as being a considerer. So now they're really super warm to the idea. So it could be people that you got through there, or it could be people who were at stage 2. They were pre-considerers, and so you did, an awesome job letting them know of how, the importance of leaving a gift, how they can do it, et cetera, et cetera. And then they came to you and said, you know what, I am interested. This sounds really good. It sounds like something I'd want to do, and I definitely care enough about your mission that I want to do this. So this is where it's no longer, I wrote beginning of the relationship. This is where the relationship is becoming very much more intense, a lot more personalized. Now you have a rapport with them. There's trust. So they're really warmed up. So guess what? We're going to talk about how would you engage your donors to move them to the next stage? So now they are warmed up. So they said, yes, I am considering this. And yes, I do want to, I am at that point where I want to engage I want to give you a gift. So put yourself in that situation. What would you do to get them to really become actual intenders, because that's what the next stage is. It's intenders. So they're considering it, but it's not. The deal is not sealed. So how would you seal the deal at this point? So ask them what questions they have. Ask to visit, answer their questions. Absolutely. Help have them fill out a commitment form. They haven't quite committed, Megan. They're not quite there yet. They're in the consideration stage, right? They're thinking about it. So I would say things like, provide them with sample will language. Give them a legacy package, where you have all the necessary legal terms, the full, full name of the organization, all the information that the notary or the lawyer will require in order to do the will, information about the impact of the legacy gift, that kind of stuff. Even an online will writing options. There are that kind of stuff as well. Or if you have in your area a free will network, give them that option. If they do not have special advisors, if they don't have an attorney or anything, do you have a list of possible attorneys that you can refer them to? You know, that kind of stuff. This is basically what you're trying to get them to do. The ultimate call to action at this stage is for them to make the actual decision to put you in their will. So these are really, really great idea. Oh, hold a legacy planning session. Yes, absolutely. So I've done that. There's one of the organizations I give monthly invited me to a will information session. And of course, I'm friends with the fundraisers there. So when I asked them if I could attend, they said, of course. So they wanted me to attend as a donor, but also as a fundraiser, so I could then be sort of a critique per se. And it was really well done. 1 hour with, in this case, because it's in the province of Quebec in Canada, it was a notary, but it could be an attorney, whatever the case may be in your particular community. 1 hour, limited numbers. I think we were a total of 8 people, so it has to be small and intimate so that everybody feels like their questions can be answered. Nobody wants to have a 30-person thing because it's very personal. So you need to feel like it's a safe environment. And it was really fun because there was, snacks and coffee and tea and so on. We started on time. We did a fun exercise to demystify a lot of the misconceptions about, writing a will and what happens if you die without a will, et cetera, and then talked about it. So there was a very soft ask. There was never a harsh ask. And I guess the key element is for you to select the right professional that won't make it look like it's a hard ask or that they're like a used car salesman. So you have to be really, really strategic into that. So some really, really great suggestions here. So moving on. So now they've gone from considerers to intenders. So now you've done such an amazing job with your legacy web seminar, with your face-to-face meetings, with your booklet, with your legacy folder, etc. And now they said to you, yes, I love it. The supporter has indicated that they intend to leave you. I wrote Greenpeace here. It should be your organization. I'm sorry, and that they've told you that they intend to leave you a gift, and that they're actively discussing the details with family members or their professional advisors. So, obviously, at this point, you moved from a mass marketing approach. If you were doing a mass marketing approach, now you're very much on the one-on-one personalized approach. So the key here is to strengthen your relationship with them. So really solidify this and bring that ship to shore. So together, they've said this to you. You've got this donor who said to you, all right, I'm ready. I'm going to do this. I'm going to talk to my family, and I'm going to talk to my attorney. How do you move them forward in their legacy? So what is it that they want? What is it that you want to do to make sure that they sign on the dotted line? I'll give you 1 minute here. So some of it might be very similar to what we discussed before. So if you hadn't already done so, or even if you did and they probably have forgotten, because, keep in mind, most of the time, these kinds of donors are older. So you may want to send out, again, sample language that they can use, a little bit more information on the legacy program. This is where perhaps you can even introduce the Legacy Society. This would be appropriate. You can talk about how they'll be recognized after, and you can have that conversation with them of, how do they want to be recognized? And this is where you can also give them the legacy commitment form, reassuring them, of course, that it's not because they signed a commitment form that they cannot change their mind. Again, it's always about making them feel comfortable, that you'll respect their wishes, and that they will be driving the whole process. And this is where you probably, again, want to give them online will writing options, list of notaries, attorneys, etc. And of course, this is where the personalized cards come in, either for birthdays. You may not have the exact date, but if you've collected in the past the month and the year, you know their age, so you can send birthday cards, or season's greetings cards, Valentine's Day cards, things like that. So these are other, there's a lot of ways that you can engage them and start the recognition process. I really love your suggestion, Lindsay, to involve their children in the discussion. Absolutely. However, the only thing I would say, and if people disagree with me, that's okay. I would advise the donor to say, please make sure that you let your family know of your wishes, as opposed to saying, why don't you bring your child to the conversation? The reason why I say this is because if you invite, and child, I mean, they're obviously grown children, but you don't want to put yourself in a situation where, the children could possibly feel like you might want to impose some undue pressure on the donor, because obviously, we all know whenever it's a conversation about money, people get really, really testy. And so you want to make sure that the donor feels that you have their best interest at heart, but you also don't want to put yourself in a situation where the children could turn around and be, completely against the donation. So I would be more supportive of the idea of saying, please make sure you communicate your wishes with your loved ones, with everybody, so that there's no misunderstandings, as opposed to inviting, their child or whoever may be left to come to the conversation. But that's just from my experience. And okay, so now you've done that work. They're going to the notary. One key element, and I know this comes up when I give my ethics sessions, is you should not put yourself in a situation where you will be driving the donor to their attorney. That would be a big epic fail. So if needs be, perhaps get someone else or a trusted volunteer at the organization to accompany them if the person is too ill or is incapable of driving themselves there, but you should not be the person doing that. Just want to put it out there. And then the last stage is the pledger. So this is where they've come back and they said, that's it, it's done. You are in my will. We're very excited. So what happens? So you have to keep in mind there is a risk that they could change the will. And unfortunately, I have seen people who look at this as being the end of the process. No. If anything, this is where things really start, because you're in their will, but let's not forget that wills can be changed. I mean, I've done it. I changed my will. I removed a cherry from my will because they treated me bad after I left. This is where you have to be really, really good at the engagement. So meaningful and respectful recognition, increase the personalization. So how would you continue recognizing and engaging your donors? Because recognizing and engaging, two different things. You want to recognize them, but you want to keep them informed. You want to keep them excited about their gift for years to come. So how would you do this? So how could you, in your organization, keep them engaged for years to come? So some examples of what we do is we send personalized thank you call from the legacy manager, the executive director, the board chair. We love to capture testimonials because, of course, your current pledgers are the best people to inspire others to make a gift. Use those testimonials in newsletters, online, etc. Something that we're starting to do, and actually Greenpeace Spain is going to start doing that, is in their gift commitment form, we're asking donors to write a message for future generations, okay? And so that we can continue, sharing what our past donors, the ones who have passed away, what their wishes were for the future generations, because, being environmental, that makes sense. And so it may sound kind of creepy to some people, but we felt that this could be something really inspiring for others. And of course, recognition through events, Legacy Society, personalized calls, personalized cards, etc. So there's a lot of, and of course, in your organization, there's a lot of ways to do it. So depending on what your mission is, you could integrate that as well. So yeah, and then of course the last stage is the gift. So when the gift is realized. So the supporter has passed away, the gift has been received or is expected. So now the only element left to do is to report it and report the impact. So it's not because a person has died. If you know who their next of kin is, then you can report back about how the gift will be recognized, but also will impact. So once you've received the gift, how would you leverage that for more pledges? I'll give you a minute. There's a lot of brain trust happening, a lot of great ideas. This is so amazing. I really want to keep track of. I'll keep track of this and want to share everything because it's always easier to brainstorm when we're a lot of people together. Yes, Kent. Ask for their biography that you can share when they move on. Yes. Ask for their family if they would like to share their donor story. Absolutely. That's great. Great ideas. Using personal stories. Of course, this is where, this is the epitome of storytelling, right? And of course, yes, report back the impact to family and friends. Absolutely. Definitely. It's key because you never know that your donor's family or next of kin and friends might be interested in giving a gift to your will. So a gift of their will to your organization. Excuse me, that's what I meant to say. So you can't forget that there is still potential within that family. So you need to tap into that. This is awesome. You guys are really, really fabulous. You've got some really great suggestions. So yeah, telling the stories in legacy newsletters or just a general newsletter, absolutely. Again, it's all about, strategic marketing. So those are all the steps in the legacy pipeline. As you can see, everything is well thought out. It's strategic. There's a lot of ways that you can engage your donors. And of course, another training I do is on how do we report all of this? And we've got very, very elaborate KPIs and metrics that we report on a quarterly basis. And it's all based on all these steps and then a few more as well. So I want to take some time to take some questions, but here you've got a slide with some books I recommend that could be really useful. And I would say really the best one, my Bible, is Inside the Brain of the Bequest Donor by Russell James. If you don't have that book, send me an email. I know you can buy the book, and if you prefer to buy the book, go for it. But Russell James emailed me the PDF of the entire book, so you don't have to buy it. So if you want it, you have my contact information right here. You can email me, and I'll happily send you the link to the Dropbox where I have the book because I can't send it by email. It's too big of a file. But, it is the absolute must-read book you should read. So we've got 3 minutes. I'm happy to stay a few more minutes if you want to answer questions. So I'm going to quickly scroll through. If I don't get to your question and you're burning up to ask me, type it up again quick so that I can see it. And yeah, I'll answer your question. Are there good templates out there to draft a gift commitment form, or do you advise having an attorney draft one? Well, the gift, I don't think an attorney needs to draft one because basically it's an informal pledge between the donor and you. I'm happy to send you, Stacey, a sample of what I have, which is something that I had seen in an organization that I worked at many, many years ago, and I've been adapting it and et cetera. So I'm happy to share that. If you email me, or if anybody in this webinar emails me with the subject line commitment form, I will send it out to you. And then you can adapt it to your needs. So yeah, we can do that. I'm big about sharing resources. So please do write to me. Let's see. Do you track your pipeline moves management in your CRM? Yes, we do. So here's a challenge at Greenpeace. We're not all in this. We don't all use the same CRM, and so everybody does it differently. But yes, we track every person on a quarterly basis. We track everybody at every stage, and then that's what goes into our quarterly reports, which then, as of this year, last year I did a huge project which involved, simplifying the pipeline. We redefined all our KPIs to make sure that everybody had the same definition. And we're rolling out this year a new legacy dashboard that includes this pipeline that you guys just saw, and a few other KPIs in there. So it's a really sophisticated tool. And it's not all based on it's not all based on revenue. Of course, revenue is important, but I'm putting emphasis on lead generation and movement in the pipeline, because then the money comes in after. Do you also have the guest brochures examples that you can send out? I do. I also have some from other organizations, and I would say, Megan, my inspiration has been throughout my career because the first organizations to start developing plan giving programs have been universities and hospital foundations. I often use examples from them, and then I've tweaked it. Because at Greenpeace we're doing a lot of mass marketing, because we've got databases of 30,000, 40, 50,000 people. We don't, we're just starting to develop some brochures. And right now, the only ones that I would say are worthy of sharing are in markets where they don't speak English as a first language. So obviously that's pretty useless to you. But I would encourage you to go look at some hospitals and university foundations that you respect and looking at what they do, and then pick the best stuff that comes out of there. How do you best report legacy giving expectancies? I love that question. We are currently working on developing a tool to do a projecting tool. But basically, as a quick answer, the best way to do it is looking at your pipeline. So looking at your pledges, and then looking at how many are women and how many are men, what their age is, and then you measure that against. So there's different elements that you can consider in your formula. A is looking at actuarial tables of life expectancies, so that you can get that through financial institutions, and then looking at looking back at the median gift, not the average gift, the median gift of legacy gifts for the last 5 or 10 years. It's up to you to decide. And I say median gift because if you use average gift, if you've had a few very low gifts or a few very high abnormal gifts, it could throw off your number. So if you decide to use your median, for instance, like Greenpeace, what we're using is for median is we're dropping off the lowest 10% and the highest 10%, and anything that's in the middle, that's what we use. So Lauren is happy to share her template. If you want to send more than one sample to viewers. So Lauren, if you send it to me, I'm happy to send it to others who ask for it. So absolutely, I'll do that. And I see that we're 3 minutes over time, but I'm happy to stay here. Do you have heard about this perhaps? Free Will Network? Yes, absolutely. I actually met with the gentleman who does that, who is from the UK. And I believe they had an agreement with the Canadian Association of Gift Planners. It has not been renewed lately, but I know that I think they might be in conversation. Quite honestly, I've never done any research to see if there's any ethical issues, but I'd happily look into it. So I can't quite answer that question, Darcy, right at this moment because I haven't done that work. Skylar is asking, is there a respectful way to ask the amount a donor is leaving? This is where the gift commitment form is really helpful because you can say, if you wish to share what the terms are, if it's a fixed amount or a percentage of the estate, you can say that in the form. So this is where it takes the pressure off of you from asking that question, which can be really, really awkward. And this is where, the gift commitment form can be a good way to track that. And of course, I know senior management put pressure to get that number. Let me see. Okay, I'm going to give you guys 1 more minute. When do you suggest we ask for a copy of the will? I don't ask the copy of the will. I prefer getting the gift commitment form because obviously, as we said, a will can be changed anytime. So they can give you a copy of the will and then next year something changes and they change their will and they don't tell you, and then that copy of the will is pointless. It's useless. Much like the commitment form, of course, but it's a little bit different and it's less intimidating. I've had some donors in the past in other organizations that had a negative reaction to asking the question about asking for a copy of the will. So that's why I think the commitment form is a little bit better, and it allows you to ask other questions like, would you like to leave a testimonial? Do you want to give the name of the executor or the next of kin that we should communicate, when the time comes, etc. All right, so we're 5 minutes over time. I think we're going to wrap it up. I want to thank you very, very much for your active participation. This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this. Again, I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question, but please do email me with your questions or requests for tools or whatever. I'm all about sharing, and if you have something to share with me, please share it with me because I want to receive as well. So, and let's keep the conversation going, and wish you much success. Good luck. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Muchas gracias for your participation. And hopefully we'll see you at the conference, at the international conference in New Orleans next April, because I will be there. So look me up. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great afternoon. Bye.
Thank you for attending today's webinar. Please take a brief moment to complete our survey, which will help us plan future events. Upon completion of the survey, you will be able to download and print your certificate. For a complete list of upcoming events, please visit www.pathlms.com/AFP/events. This concludes today's program. Thank you and have a great day.